ॐ नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। ॐ नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। ॐ नमो भगवते नारायणाय। ॐ नमो भगवते नारायणाय। शुक्लांबरधरं विष्णुं शशिवर्णं चतुर्भुजं प्रसन्नवदनं ध्यायेत् सर्वविघ्नोपशान्तये। अनन्तसंसारसमुद्रतार नौकायिताभ्यां गुरुभक्तिदाभ्यां वैराग्यसाम्राज्यदपूजनाभ्यां नमो नमः श्री गुरुपादुकाभ्याम्। अञ्जनानन्दनं वीरं जानकी शोकनाशनं कपीशमक्षहन्तारं वन्दे लङ्काभयङ्करं। कृष्णाय वासुदेवाय देवकी नन्दनाय च नन्दगोपकुमाराय गोविन्दाय नमो नमः। यदङ्घ्रिपङ्केरुगरेणुलग्नं निपीयनीरं विमलन्तरङ्गः जानामि तत्त्वं निजमात्मरूपम्। जानामि तत्त्वं निजमात्मरूपम्। तं नौमि नारायणतीर्थमार्यम्। तं नौमि नारायणतीर्थमार्यम्। Namaskaram, all of you. Welcome to the 37th session of Krishna Leela Tarangini. As you may remember, in the last session, namely the 36th session, we continued on the Gopi Vastrabharam episode, especially the philosophical content emphasized by Sukha and Bhattadri in Bhagavatam and Narayaniyam, respectively. Beginning with a musical samvadam between the pleading Gopikas and responding by Krishna, in which Sri Naranatirtha portrayed the quintessence of Atmabodha. This samvadam led us to briefly appreciate Shankara Bhagavad Pada's Atmabodha and also Bhagavan Ramana's faithful transliteration in exquisite Tamil poetry. Naranatirtha then concluded that Leela with two slokas, 127 and 128, which we saw last week. Let us now see how Tirtha takes us to the next major episode, GovardhanOddharanam, through slokam 129 and Geetam 46. Indrayaga samarambanandadinam Indrayaga samarambanandadinam Indrayaga samaramba Nandadinam vilokya saha ऐश्वर्य क्यापयन् स्वीयम् ऐश्वर्य क्यापयन् स्वीयम् नन्दमामोगेदम् अच्युत इन्द्रयाग समारम्भ नन्दादीनम् विलोक्य सह ऐश्वर्य क्यापयन् स्वीयम् नन्दमामोगेदम् नन्दमामोगेदम् अच्युत 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 आमोगेदम् इन्द्रयाग समारम्भ इन्द्रयाग समारम्भ सम्भ्रम इगतु मुदामन्ये इन्द्रयाग समारम्भ चन्द्रविपावक मुखसुरवर परिगणित विभूतिरयङ्गी तात चन्द्रविपावक मुखसुरवर परिगणित विभूतिरयङ्गी तात चन्द्रविपावक मुखसुरवर परिगणित विभूति प्रयोगी तात इन्द्रयाग समारम्भ सम्भ्रम इगतु मुदामन्ये इन्द्रयाग समारम्भ सकल लोक जनकं सकलागम सकल लोक जनकं सकलागम संबोधित महिमानमनिन्द्रं संबोधित प्राकटित जगदण्ड कोटिवदनमिग प्रकटित जगदण्ड कोटिवदनमिग साक्षादेव विगाय महेन्द्र प्रकटित जगदण्ड कोटिवदनमिग साक्षादेव विगाय महेन्द्र इन्द्रयाग समारम्भ इन्द्रयाग समारम्भ सम्भ्रम इगतु मुदामन्ये इन्द्रयाग समारम्भ गिरिवन सरिदमर नरकगादिषु गिरिवर सरिद अमर नरकगादिषु परिपूर्ण बोध रसमागम विदिता गिरिवन सरिदमर नरकादिषु परिपूर्ण बोध रसम आगम विदितम् हरिमिग गोवर्धनगिरिवरयुतम् हरिमिग गोवर्धनगिरिवरयुतम् अच्युतमेव भजामो विरतम् अच्युतमेव भजामो विरतम् इन्द्रय Sambrama Tigatu Mudamanye Ildayaga Samaramba Nandanandana Geetam Pidambuvi Nandanandana Geetam Pidambuvi Nandagopahitam Maduraduna Nandagopahitam Maduraduna Nandayogi Vichilditamanu Nandayogi Vichilditamanu Shivanarayana Tirtham Kridamidi Vidinam Nandayogi Vichilditamanu Shivanarayana Tirtham Kridamidi Vidunam Nandayogi Vichilditamanu Shivanarayana Tirtham Kridamidi Vidinam Narayana Tirtha Kridamidi Vidina Narayana Tirtha Kridamidi Vidina Indrayaga Samarambam Sambrama Igatu Mudamanye Nandanandana Geetam Idambuvi Nandagopahitam Maduradana Nandanandana Geetam Idambuvi Nandagopahitam Maduhu Aduna Nanda Yogi Vichintitam Anu Shiva Narayana Tirtha Kritamiti Vidina. This song of Krishna from or by the delight of Nanda is intended to be for the benefit of mankind. This was repeatedly pondered over very deeply by the steadfast Nanda. It's now been rendered in poetry by Narayana Tirtha, the follower of Shiva. Here the Shiva Narayana Tirtha Shiva refers to Ramananda Tirtha. Sri Narayana Tirtha was born in Katha near Guntur, Andhra Pradesh in 1675 and was named Govinda Shastri in his early age. A precocious child, Govinda mastered the Vedas and Vedangas at an early age and acquired a high proficiency in Sangeetam and Natya Shastras. A divine call led Govinda to Kashi, where he ended up meeting his guru, Ramananda Tirtha, who was otherwise known as Shiva by his disciples and other scholars around him, who in fact ordained Govinda to become Narayana Tirtha from that point. That is how we see the mudra of Shiva often used by Narayana Tirtha in his songs. You saw the meaning in the slides as to how convincing Krishna was in dissuading his father Nanda and the entire clan of Yadukulam and not to be hung up on worshipping Indra, who is yet another demigod, enjoying his time in Swarga, thanks to the karma in his prior births, and not because he is worthier than most others, certainly including Govardhanagiri. What is so special about Govardhanagiri and why Krishna directed them to worship the mountain instead of Indra? It's a big question. All these questions and that follow those questions also require context. Let us step back and see where we find the reference for this. Yes, one place where we see some extensive background of Krishna Leela is Garga Samhita, and which provides the answer to that question. At the request of Brahma, Sri Krishna himself narrated his life story to his consort Radha. Krishna also narrated it to Adisesha, who came with him as Baladeva, since Baladeva also had prayed to his brother to narrate that so. Subsequently, Bhagavan Adisesha narrated it to Brahma, who in turn narrated it to Dharmadeva at his request. Dharma then gave it as a nectarian description to his sons Nara and Narayana Rishi. Narayana Rishi narrated the life story of Sri Krishna to his student Narada Muni, who in turn narrated it to Garga, one of the greatest of Acharyas around that time. After hearing the story of Krishna from Narada, the sage Garga attained divine knowledge due to his unparalleled bhakti to the Supreme Brahman. Narada said to Sri Gargamuni, I have narrated to you the glory of Bhagavan Krishna in brief. This story fulfills the desires of all and increases Krishna Bhakti. However, due to my fondness for listening to such story and Krishna Katha again and again, a bit more expansively than what I narrated to you, and also because true Vaishnavas, I request you to create an astonishing work which would further expand this story or Leela. O great Brahmana Shrestha Garga, the great Veda Vyasa composed Srimad Bhagavatam at my instance, at my request. So, O Garga, therefore, your composition should present my instructive conversation to Bahulasva, who will protect the Samhita at the same time for posterity. On hearing the words of Narada, Gargacharya smiled and said, O, the greatest of Brahmanas that creation ever created, Sri Narada, your request is indeed quite a difficult task, but still I shall perform it with you and with your grace and by your grace. Then after returning to his hermitage, Garga composed a remarkable Garga Samhita describing the conversation between sage Narada and King Bahulasva. Who is this great king? Bahulasva was a king of Videha ruling from Mithila, and he also happened to be the son of the distinguished Dhriti. He is also the father of Kriti, a very great devotee of Krishna. In the 10th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, chapter 86, there is a reference to Krishna's travels to Mithila, along with his entourage of all great sages, including Narada, to visit both Srutadeva, one of the finest of Brahmanas about whom there is a reference in Bhagavatam, of the two Brahmanas whom Krishna visited. One such great man was Srutadeva. He also lived in Mithila at around the same time of King Bahulasva's reign. And chapter 86 explained how Krishna pleased both of them, both Srutadeva and Bahulasva, who had invited him concurrently at the same time. And how did Krishna manage to please them both? By taking two incarnations and simultaneously entering both their grihams, one a hermit, another the palace, to bless them without any difference. That's a very interesting story in chapter 86 of 10th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. Time permitting, we will even touch upon that much later. Garga Samhita is comprised of 12,000 remarkable verses describing various episodes relating to Krishna Leela. Garga heard about these episodes from the mouths of his teachers and witnessed the sports of Krishna with his own eyes. In fact, you may remember in an earlier session, we talked about how Garga named Sri Krishna. Garga incorporated all of them in the form of a Samhita. In fact, I have a copy of the 1897 publication of the Garga Samhita, reprinted in 1912. But it has got text in Sanskrit and meaning only in Hindi. It's close to 900 pages. The slokams 10 to 12 of chapter 1 of Garga Samhita, in fact, releases the riddle that I mentioned earlier, why Krishna should say Govardhana mountain is far superior to Indra. Is there an answer? Yes, the answer is in Garga Samhita. Govi Prasadi Agnisuraha Srutitata Dharmascha Yajnadipatehe Vibhutayaha Dishnyeshu Chaiteshu Harim Bhajanti Ye Sadat Vihamutra Sukham Vrajanti Te. The cows, saintly persons, fire gods, all other demigods, Vedas, Govi Prasadi Agni Suraha Srutistata Dharmascha Yajnadipatehe. And principles of religion are all potencies of Bhagavan Hari, the Supreme Brahman. They who instead of worshipping the demigods worship only Lord Hari, and they attain happiness in this life and the lives to come and forever until the creation exists. Samuttito Sauhari Vakshaso Girihi Govardhano Nama Girindra Raja Rat Samagato Hi Yatra Pulastya Tejasa Yaddarshana Janma Punarna Vidyate. This hill or the mountain named Govardhana is the king of the kings of the kings of mountains. Samuttito Sauhari Vakshaso Girihi Govardhano Nama Giri Indra Raja Rat. So much of qualification is given by Garga. Girindra Raja Rat. So this mountain Govardhana is the king of the kings of mountains. Samagato hi yatra pulastya tejasa. This mountain was born from Bhagavan Hari's own chest. It has come here by the power of Paulastya Muni. Yaddasana janma punar navidyate yatra pulastya tejasa samagato hi. Born from Hari's chest, it has come down here by the sheer power of Pulastya Muni, who brought it down. By seeing it, one becomes free from having to take birth again in this world. Such is the greatness of this mountain. Instead of worshipping this mountain, you folks are going behind Indra. That's the purpose of this sloka here. And the origin of Govardhana mountain and the greatness is also in the words of Krishna, clearly delineated by Garga, which of course Sukha is also we are going to see Sukha mentioning it in Bhagavatam. In sequence, maybe Garga took it from Sukha Bhagavatam, but amplified it more at the request of Narada. Sampujya Govi Prasurat Mahadre Datavyam Adyaiva Paramhi Upayanam Yesha Priyome Makaraja Yevahi Na Chedyate Cha Asti Tata Kuru Braja. Let us do this way. Let us first worship the cows. Sampujya Govi Prasurat Maha Adraye Datavyam. Cows, brahmanas, and demigods, and then make a great offering to Govardhana hill. But let Govardhana mountain become the most important personality whom you are all going to wish and pray and do your sacrifice today. That offering is the king of yajnas, and it is very dear to me. Remember that. If you do that, you will be pleasing me, in fact. But of course, if you do not desire to make that offering to Govardhana, you want to continue with Indra, then whatever you wish, you continue to do. I'm not going to stop you. But if you want to please me, pray to Govardhana mountain and offer everything that you've kept ready for Indra unto Govardhana and ignore Indra. This is my wish. Narana Tirtha was very mild in the song where Krishna's comments were minimal and soft. But Sukha's narration in chapter 24 was a lot more sweeping and firm, if not admonishing Indra and explaining to Nanda and all others the need to understand the purpose behind such yaga yajnas or sacrifices. Let us listen to the 13th slokam of chapter 24 of Srimad Bhagavatam, the Samaskandam. And from this point on, we will have a number of slokas of Sukha explaining the background. Karmana jayate jantu कर्मणा जायते जन्तुः कर्मणैव प्रलीयते सुखं दुःखं भयं क्षेमं सुखं दुःखं भयं क्षेमं कर्मणैवाभिपद्यते कर्मणि एवाभिपद्यते अभिपद्यते कर्मणा जायते जन्तुः कर्मणैव प्रलीयते सुखं दुःखं भयं क्षेमं कर्मणैव अभिपद्यते. It is by the force of karma that a living entity takes birth, and it is by karma alone that he meets his destruction. So the living entity's happiness, distress, fear, and sense of security, all of them arise as the effects of karma only. This is what Sri Krishna says through the words of Sukha in Srimad Bhagavatam, chapter 24. Bhagavan Krishna minimized the importance of the demigods by speaking the philosophy known as Karmavada or Karma Mimamsa, which basically is often interpreted as atheism, but with a belief in reincarnation. According to this philosophy known as Karma Mimamsa or Karmavada, there are subtle laws of nature that reward or punish us according to how we act. We all know the great maxim, as you sow, so shall you reap. In a future life, one reaps the fruit of his present work, and this is the sum and substance of reality. Bhagavan Krishna, Sakshat Bhagavan himself, ultimate Paramatma, could hardly be a serious proponent of this mediocre philosophy. This philosophy is not considered to be something profound. People generally say karma mimamsa or karmavada is somewhat mediocre. In the role of a young cowherd boy, Krishna was simply teasing his pure devotees by preaching such. I've spoken about Sri Jiva Goswami from the Gaudiya Sampradaya, who lived in 16th century. He wrote in his commentary that Bhagavan Krishna was thinking when he was interpreting this particular sloka. Jiva Goswami wrote that Krishna thought when he said this, why are these eternal associates of mine appearing as my father and other relatives and friends so caught up in this worship of Indra? That must have been bothering Krishna. Thus, although Bhagavan's main purpose was to take away the false pride of Indra, he also wanted to remind his eternal devotees that they need not divert their attention to other so-called demigods, since in fact his devotees right in Gokulam were so specially privileged to live with the supreme absolute truth. What many people, many sages take millions of births and so much tapas to be close to Paramatma, here all the Gokulavasis are very close to him and they are living with Krishna and playing with him. So Bhagavan wanted to teach them a lesson when in fact he, the ultimate goal of anyone's life is by their side. Why should they really run after other Upadevatas, demigods and all that? Of course, I had explained earlier, Jiva Goswami was from Gaudiya Vaishnava school of Vedanta tradition, and he had produced a number of philosophical works on the theology and practice of Bhakti Yoga. Of course, he wrote on Vaishnava Vedanta and all other associated disciplines. But he's one of the great exponents of Srimad Bhagavatam, Sukha Bhagavatam, and thereby he wrote commentary for sloka by sloka. In fact, Jiva Goswami is one of the 6 Goswamis of Vrindavan and was the nephew of the 2 leading proponents about whom I have spoken, Rupa Goswami and Sanatana Goswami. They are also great Vaishnava scholars. And Jiva Goswami happens to be the nephew of those 2, and he lived in the early 16th century. Let us listen to the next sloka where Krishna makes an hypothetical argument.
Asti chedishwarah Kashchit palarupi Asti chedishwarah Kashchit palarupi anya karmana kartaram bhajate sopi na hyakartuhu prabhurhi saha nahi hyakartuhu prabhurhi saha kimindrene gabhutanam swaskarmanuvartinayam kimindrena bhutanam swaskarmanuvartinam anishenanyata kartum anishenanyata kartum swabhava vihiton nrunam
Krishna argues that hypothetically, even if there is a supreme controller, he must depend on a performer of activity to reciprocate with and must therefore also be subject to the laws of karma, being obliged to award happiness and distress to conditioned souls according to the laws of good and evil. And of course, in the sloka 15, Krishna continues, Kimindre bhutanam swakarmanu vartinam anishenanyata kartum swabhava vihitam nrunam. Living beings in this world are forced to experience the consequences of their own particular previous action or karma. Since Lord Indra cannot in any way change the destiny of human beings, why should people go to the demigods like Indra and worship him when his role is minimal, if not nothing? So Bhagavan Krishna's argument here is not a negation of free will. If one were to accept the existence of karma as a system of laws awarding reactions for our present activities, then we ourselves, according to our nature, will decide our future. Our happiness and distress in this life have already been adjudicated and fixed according to our own purva karma or prior actions. And not even the demigods can change that. They must award us the prosperity or poverty, sickness or health, happiness or distress due us by our previous action. However, we still retain the freedom to select a pious or impious mode of activity or karma in this life. There again, it behooves us because of our own karma. And the choice that we make will determine not only our future suffering and enjoyment, but also how to wade through the present so that you don't have repeated births. Even the demigods are bound and limited by the laws of karma. That Indra himself is subordinate to the laws of karma is explicitly stated in the Brahma Samhita. In Brahma Samhita, chapter 5, which is very significant or important, where everything ends up saying, Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami. Let us hear the slokam first. Yatu Indra Gopam Atava
यत्तु इन्द्रकोपा यत्तु इन्द्रकोपा अथवा इन्द्रमः स्वकर्मबन्ध इन्द्रमः स्वकर्मबन्ध अनुरूप 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 फलभाजनम् आदनाति कर्माणि निर्दहति किन्तु न भक्तिः भक्तिभाजा गोविन्दमादिपुरुषं तामहं भजामि गोविन्दमादिपुरुषं तामहं भजामि आजीव्यैकतरं भावम् आजीव्यैकतरं भावम् आजीव्यैकतरं भावम् यस्त्वन्यम् उपजीवति न तस्मात् विन्दते क्षेमम् न तस्मात् विन्दते क्षेमम् न तस्मात् विन्दते क्षेमम् जारान्नार्यसति यथा आजीव्यैकतरं भावम् यस्त्वन्यमुपजीवति न तस्मात् विन्दते क्षेमम् जारान् नार्यसति यथा वर्तेत ब्रह्मणा विप्रो राजन्यो रक्ष्या भुवः वैश्यस्तु वार्तया जीवेत् वैश्यस्तु वार्तया जीवेत् शूद्रस्तु द्विजसेवया वर्तेत ब्रह्मणा विप्रो राजन्यो रक्षया भुव वैश्यस्तु वार्तया जीवेत् शूद्रस्तु द्विजसेवया कृषिवाणिज्य गोरक्षा कुशीदं तूर्यमुच्यते वार्ता चतुर्विधा तत्र वयं गोवृत्तयोनिशम् सत्वं रजस्तम इति सत्वं रजस्तम इति चित्युत्पत्त्यन्त हेतवः रजसोत्पद्यते विश्व अन्योन्य विविध जगत् सत्वं रजस्तम इति स्थित्युत्पत्तहेतवः राजसोत्पद्यते विश्वम् रजसोत्पद्यते विश्वमन्योन्यो विविधं जगत् रजसा चोदिता मेघा रजसा चोदिता मेघा रजसा चोदिता मेघा वर्षन्ति अम्बूनि सर्वतः प्रजास्तैरैव सिद्ध्यन्ति प्रजात्यैरैव प्रजातैरैव सिद्ध्यन्ति महेन्द्र किं करिष्यति महेन्द्र किं करिष्यति
Brahma Samhita says, I adore and thereby worship the primeval Bhagavan Govinda, who burns up to their roots all fruitive activities of those who are imbued with devotion and impartially ordains for each the due enjoyment of the fruits of one's activities of all those who walk in the path of work or karma in accordance with the chain of their previously performed karma. No less in the case of tiny insect that bears the name of Indragopa than that of Indra, the king of the Devas. It's a very nice pun here. Yastu Indra Gopam Atava Indram. That is a highlight here. Whether it is the case of a very tiny insect which has the name Indra Gopa, or the great Lord, King of the Devas, Indra himself, it doesn't matter. Everyone is given their respective results according to their karma. In the next sloka, the word Shema means actual prosperity, not merely the accumulation of wealth. Here, Bhagavan Krishna boldly argues that just as a woman can never achieve the actual dignity or enlightenment from a life of being a paramour, the residents of Vrindavana will never be happy by neglecting the real source of their prosperity and worshipping Indra instead. Should be understood as an exhibition of the highest form of indignance or the transcendental anger aroused in Bhagavan when he saw his eternal devotees who have been given the highest exalted position of being with him, continuing to worship an insignificant demigod out of sheer ajnana. So he wants to dispel their darkness or ajnana. That's the reason he had been very powerful in his words. Krishna then clarifies in the next sloka, that's sloka number 20 of chapter 24. Varteta brahmana vipro rajanyo rakshayo bhuvaha. Vaishyastu vartaya jivetu shudrastu dvija sevaya. The brahmana maintains his life by studying and teaching the Vedas. The member of the royal order by protecting the earth. The maintenance of life is done by Vaishya by their trade and Shudra by serving the two born classes are Dvijas. Dvijas are who? Everyone other than the Shudra is a Dvija, whether it's a Brahmana or Kshatriya or Vaishya. They're being served by Shudra because he does not have the necessary understanding of seeking knowledge. Thereby, he is reconciled to the status of serving others. After glorifying karma or work, Bhagavan Krishna now explains what he means by prescribed duties born of one's nature. It is out of the nature of a person a designation is given in the Varna, not necessarily because somebody is born to somebody with a stamp already. Krishna was not referring to any whimsical activity, but rather to the religious duties prescribed in the Varnashrama or in the Vedic social system prevalent then. Krishi Vanijya Go Raksha Kusidam Turya Muchyate Varta Chaturvidhatadra Vayam Go Vrittayoho Anisham. The occupational duties of the Vaishya are conceived in 4 divisions: farming, commerce, cow protection, and money lending. Out of these, we as a community are always engaged in cow protection. This is what Krishna explains to Nanda, Sananda, and others in Sloka 21. Look, we as a community, Yadava Kulam, we are always engaged in cow protection. That's our job. Sattvam rajas tama iti sityutpatyanta hedavaha. Rajasotpatyate vishwam anyonyam vividam jagat. The last in that series of slokas is the causes of creation, maintenance, and destruction are the 3 modes of nature, namely sattva, rajas, tamas, goodness, passion, and ignorance. In particular, the mode of passion creates this universe, and through, of course, the combination of man and woman causes it to become full of variety. Anticipating the possible objection that a livelihood based on cow protection certainly depends on Lord Indra, because he was maintaining this kind of line of talk because he thought some of the elders in the Gopa clan will definitely ask him back saying, aren't we really protecting the cows? Don't you think then we have to depend on Lord Indra because he is the one who is causing rain? So Bhagavan introduces here the mechanistic theory or atheistic Sankhya. The tendency to attribute exclusive causality to the apparently mechanistic functions of nature is an old tendency indeed. 5,000 years ago, Bhagavan Krishna referred to a doctrine already well known in human society. Krishna continues by saying, impelled by the material mode of passion, the clouds pour down their rain everywhere, and by this rain all creatures gain their sustenance. Rajasa chodita megha varshayanti ambuni sarvataha. Prajaste raiva siddhyanti mahendraha kinkarishyati. What has that Indra got to do with the formation of rain and pouring down by the clouds for the sustenance of all creatures in this creation? The word sarvataha indicates that the clouds magnanimously pour their rain even on the ocean, rocks, barren land, even sewer, and places where there is no apparent necessity for such sweet water. They continue to pour all over the place without any discrimination. So where does Indra come here in all this?
Iti srutva vacham Iti srutva vacha Iti srutva vacham piturai bhavanaga sarasa Digetarno satyam Magavajanita vrittiritiyate Iti srutva vacham piturai bhavanaga sarasam Digetanno satyam magavajanita vrittiritiyate Adrittam jivanam Adrittam jivanam Srujati kalu vrittiu Samuchitam Maharanye vrikshaga Kimiva balyam Indraya dadate Maharanye Jivanam Srujati adrittam kalu vrittim samujitam maharanye vrikshaha kimiva balim indraya dadate nanapuro janapada nagrama nanapuro janapada nagrama nagruhavayam vanaukasaha tata nityam vanashaila nivasinaha vanashaila nivasinaha vanashaila nivasinaha idam tavat idam tavat satyam idam tavat satyam yadiga pashavana uladana idam tavat satyam yadiga pashavana kuladana tada jivyaya asau balihi achala bhartre samujitaha surebhyapi abhivutkrittananudharani deva shititale tataste api aradhya iti jagadi tattvam nijajanayan jagadita tvam nijajana
In Dasakam 62, Sloka 3, Bhattadri is more forceful. That's what we just now heard. Well, when Nanda was trying to explain how it is important that how for ages they have been doing the prarthana, special prayers to Indra and doing sacrifice for him, Krishna was kind of unconvinced, and because he already had a purpose in his mind. So Krishna refuted the statement of Nanda, all right, but he said with reasoning his response, but in a very pleasing manner. Bhavanaha sarasam. It is not true that Indra causes rain to fall. Rain falls or fails to fall depending upon the good and bad deeds of living beings to the environment. If they are good to the environment, the rains will come. If they are bad to the environment, destroy the trees and make mountains nothing but uninhabitable. They drive away the animals, and all the cohesion that has been built by nature has been messed up by humans. That's the time when the rains stop. It has nothing to do with Indra. The propriety of Bhagavan's action in dissuading the Gopas from performing the sacrifice to Indra, who has been acclaimed as the presiding deity for all rain in all the scriptures, including the Shrutis, deserves a lot more elaboration. One may wonder, well, there is so much reference all over the Upanishads and every sutra and sukta possible about the duty of Indra and how Indra is pleased. All of a sudden, Bhagavan is saying, well, ignore Indra. That is not how the rains are caused. The commentators have not attempted it for want of space. Those who are really interested in this may kindly refer to Tantra Vartika by Kumarila Bhatta. It is known as Sabara Bhashya Mimamsa Sutra. Let us see how Krishna, in the words of Sukha to Parikshit, address this aspect of it. For that, we need to go to Slokam number 24. which we just now heard. My dear father, our home is not in the cities or towns or villages. Being forest dwellers, we always live in the forest and on the hills. Of course, in Narayaniam, in Dashakam 62, Sloka 4, Krishna says, "Oh father, your statement that cows are our clan's wealth is certainly true. Hence, it is our responsibility to protect the cows. However, this offering or sacrifice meant for securing plentiful supplies of grass and water, so necessary for the cows, would be more appropriate if this is made to Govardhana mountain, which in fact provides us that supplies of grass and water and everything that we require for the cows. Mountain provides it. Moreover, Brahmanas propitiate devas by offering to the sacred fire oblations of harvest, sanctified by chanting the mantras, Vedic hymns, to bring down, which have the power to turn the oblations into amritam, nectar, namely water. Those Brahmanas are verily greater than the devas themselves. So, let me give you a truth. Ignore Indra. Praise the Brahmanas, who are the cause for it for the invocation. And then praise Govardhana mountain, which produces the actual supply of grass and water. So they are worthy of all your sacrifice and prayers, etc. and offerings. Ignore Indra. So finally, he concludes in Bhagavatam in chapter 24, Sloka 25, Tasmad Gavam Brahmananam Adrehecha Arabhyatam Makaha Ya Indra Yaga Sambaraha Tairayam Sadhyatam Makaha. Therefore, why not we do a sacrifice for the pleasure of the cows, the Brahmanas, and the Govardhana hill? Yes, cows give us everything. It's our wealth. Let us pray them first. Then let us divert our attention to Brahmanas, thank them for allowing this nectar of water to come down, and let us finally go to Govardhana hill and do our prayers, because Govardhana hill saves the water, puts it in a lake, and all over the place it provides it whenever our cows go there for grass and all other things that are provided by the hill. With all the paraphernalia collected for worshipping Indra, let the sacrifice be performed instead to those three, cows, Brahmanas, and Govardhana.
Tasmad gavam brahmananam Tasmad gavam brahmananam Adreyecha Arabhyatam Makaha Tasmad gavam brahmananam Adreyecha Arabhyatam Arabhyatam Makaha Ya Indra Yaga Sambara Ya Indra Yaga Sambara Tairayam Sadhyatam Makaha Daivadinam Jagat Sarvam Mantradinam Tu Daivata Tanmantram Brahmanadinam Brahmano Mama Daivatam Anyebhyaha Asvachandala Anyebhya Asvachandala Patitebhyo Yata Arhataha Yavasam cha gavam Datva Giraye diyatam Bali Yetan mama matam tata Kriyatam Yadi rochate Ayam go brahmana adrinam Mahyam cha dayito makaha मह्यं च दयितो मकः गोवर्धनगिरे पूजां गोवर्धनगिरे 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 पूजां गोविंद वचनादरात् चक्रुः नन्दादयतु नौ चक्रुः नन्दादयतु नौ चक्रुः नन्दादयतूर्णं सावनस्य गवां तथा गोवर्धनगिरे पूजां गोविंद वचनादरात् चक्रुः नन्दादयतूर्णं सवनस्य गवां यथा सवनस्य गवां तथा भवद्वाचं श्रुत्वा बहुमतियुता भवद्वाचं श्रुत्वा बहुमतियुता तेऽपि पशुपा द्विजेन्द्रन् अर्चन्तो बलिं वदरो उच्चैः क्षितिमृते व्यदुः प्रादक्षिण्य शुभ्रसंवनमन् आदरयुताः त्वम् आदशैलात्मा बलिम् अखिल आवीर पुरतः अवोच एवं तान् किमिह वितता अवोच एवं तान् किमिह विततं मे निगदितं गिरीन्द्रो ननुयेष स्वबलिम् उपभुङ्क्ते स्ववपुषा गिरीन्द्रो ननुयेष स्वबलिम् उपभुङ्क्ते स्वपुषा अयं गोत्रद्विषि च कुपिते रक्षितुमलं समस्तान् इत्युक्त्वा जगृषुः अखिल गोकुलजुषः जगृषुः अखिल गोकुलजुषः.
In Krishna Leela Tarangini, the sloka 130, we will come back to the opera here now. In sloka 130, Narayana Tirtha says, Govardhana Girehe Pujam, Govinda Vachanadarat, Chakruhu Nandadayasturnam, Savanasya Gavam Katha. Out of respect for Govinda's words, Nanda and others expeditiously performed the worship of the Govardhanagiri, the forest, and also the cows. So hearing these words of yours, the Gopas became very happy and thus reassured they attained a sense of fulfillment, which was much more than what they used to get in previous years by performance of the yaga to that unknown Indra. Let us listen more on this subject on GovardhanOddharanam in the next session. Narayana, 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 Narayana. நாராயண 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 நாராயண. ஹரே கிருஷ்ணா. குருவாயூரப்பா. நாராயணா நாராயணா நாராயண.